Hello everyone, welcome to today's session. In this session, we'll work on the practical implementation of logistic regression. So let's move ahead and see some of the practical implementation of logistic regression. So over here, I'll be implementing two projects. When I have the data set of Titanic, so over here we'll predict what factors made people more likely to survive the sinking of the Titanic ship. And my second project will see the data analysis on the Scorpio cars. So over here we have the data of the Scorpio cars, who can purchase it and what factors made people more interested in buying Scorpio. So these will be the major questions as to why you should implement logistic regression and what output will you get by it. So let's start by the very first project, that is Titanic Data Analysis. So some of you might know that there was a ship called as Titanic, which basically hit an iceberg and it sunk to the bottom of the ocean, and it was a big disaster at that time because it was the very first voyage of the ship and it was supposed to be really strongly built and one of the best ships of that time. So it was a big disaster of that time, and of course there's a movie about this as well. So many of you might have watched it. So what we have data of the passengers, those who survived and those who did not survive in this particular tragedy. So what you have to do, you have to look at this data and analyze which factor would have been contributed the most to the chances of the person's survival on the ship or not. So using the logistic regression, we can predict whether the person survived or the person died. So apart from this, we also have a look with the various factors or various features along with that. So first, let's explore the data set. And over here we have the indexed value. Then the first column is passenger ID. Then my next column survived. So over here we have two values, a 0 and a 1. So 0 stand for did not survive and 1 stand for survive. So this column is categorical where the values are discrete. Next we have passenger class and we have three values, 1, 2 and 3. So this generally tells you that whether a passenger traveling in the first class, second class or third class. Then we have the name of the passenger, we have gender of the passenger, where the passenger is a male or female. Then we have the age, we had SIP SP. So this generally means the number of siblings or the spouses aboard the Titanic. So over here we have values such as 1, 0 and so on. Then we have Parch. Parch is the number of the parents or children aboard the Titanic. And we also have some values. Then we have the ticket number, we have the fare, we have the table number and we have the embarked column. So in my embarked column we have three values. We have S, C and Q. So S generally stands for Southampton, C stands for Cherbourg and Q stands for Queenstown. So these are the features that we'll be applying our model on. So here we'll perform various steps and then we'll be implementing logistic regression. So now these are the various steps which are required to implement any algorithm. So now in our case, we are implementing logistic regression. So very first step is to collect your data or to import the libraries that are used for collecting your data and then taking it forward. Then my next step is to analyze your data. So over here, I can go to the various field and then I can analyze the data. I can check what the females or children survive better than the males, or did the rich passenger survive more than the poor passenger, or did the money matter? as in who paid more to get into the ship with the evacuated first? And what about the workers? Does the worker survive, or what is the survival rate? If you were the worker in the ship and not just a traveling passenger? So all of these are very interesting questions and you would be going through all of them one by one. So in this stage, you need to analyze our data and explore your data as much as you can. Then my third step is to wrangle your data. Now data wrangling generally means cleaning your data. And you can simply remove the unnecessary items, or if you have null values in the data set, you can just clear that data and then you can take it forward. So in this step, you can build your model using the trained data set and then you can test it using a test. So over here, you will be performing a split, which basically split your data set into training and testing the data set, and find you will check the accuracy. So as to ensure how much accurate your values are. So I hope you guys those 5 steps got and you are going to implement in logistic regression. So now let's go into all these steps in detail. So number 1, we have to collect your data, or you can say import the libraries. So it may show you the implementation part as well. So I just open my Jupyter Notebook and I just implement all of these steps side by side. So guys, this is my Jupyter Notebook. So first, let me just rename Jupyter Notebook to, let's say, Titanic Data A. Now a full step was to import all the libraries and collect the data. So let me just import all the libraries first. So first of all, I'll import pandas. So pandas is used for data analysis. So I'll say import pandas as PD, then I will be importing numpy. So I'll say import numpy as np. So numpy is a library in Python which basically stands for numerical Python, and it is widely used to perform any scientific computation. Next, we will be importing Seaborn. So Seaborn is a library for statistical plotting. So I say import Seaborn as SNS. I'll also import matplotlib. So matplotlib library is again for plotting. So I'll say import matplotlib.py plot as plt. Now to run this library in Jupyter Notebook, all I have to write in his percentage matplotlib inline. Next, I'll be importing one module as well. So as to calculate the basic mathematical function, so I'll say import maths. So these are the libraries that I will be needed in this Titanic data analysis. So now let me just import my data first. So I'll take a variable, let's say Titanic ship data, and using the pandas, I will just read my CSV, or you can say the dataset. I like the name of my dataset, that is Titanic ship.csv. Now I have already shown you the dataset. So over here, let me just bring the top 10 rows. So for that, I will just say I take the variable Titanic ship data.head and I'll say the top 10 rows. So now I'll just run this. So to run this style, I have to press shift plus enter, or else you can just directly click on this cell. So over here, I have the index. We have the passenger ID, which is nothing but again the index which is starting from 1. Then we have the survived column, which has a categorical value, or you can say the discrete value, which is in the form of 0 and 1. Then we have the passenger class. We have the name of the passenger, sex, age, and so on. So this is the data set that I will be going forward with. Next, let us print the number of passengers which are there in the original data set. For that, I'll just simply typing in print. I'll say a number of passengers, and using the length function, I can calculate the total length. So I'll say length, and inside this, I'll be passing this variable because Titanic ship data. So I'll just copy it from here. I'll just paste it dot index, and next set me just bring this one. So here the number of passengers which are there in the original data set we have in 891. So around this number would be traveling in the Titanic ship. So over here my first step is done, where you have just collected data, imported all the libraries, and find out the total number of passengers which are traveling in Titanic. So now let me just go back to presentation and let's see what is my next step. Next step is to analyze your data. So over here we'll be creating different plots to check the relationship between variables, as in how one variable is affecting the other. So you can simply explore your data set by making use of various columns, and then you can plot a graph between them. So you can either plot a correlation graph, you can plot a distribution graph. It's up to you guys. So let me just go back to my Jupyter Notebook and let me analyze some of the data. My second part is to analyze data. So I just put this in headed 2. Now to put this headed 2, I just have to go on code, click on markdown and just run this. So first, let's plot a count plot where you can pay between the passengers who survived and who did not survive. So for that, I will be using a Seaborn library. So over here, I have imported Seaborn as SNS. So I don't have to write the whole name. I'll simply say sns.countplot. I say x equal to survive, and the data that I'll be using is the Titanic ship data, or you can say the name of the variable in which you have stored your data set. So now let me just run this. So over here, as you can see, I have survived column on my x-axis, and on the y-axis I have the count. So 0 generally stands for did not survive, and 1 stands for the passengers who did survive. So you can see that around 550 of the passengers who did not survive, and there were around 350 passengers who only survived. So here you can basically conclude that there are very less survivors than non-survivors. So this was a very first plot. Now there is not another plot to compare the gender as to whether out of all the passengers who survived and who did not survive, how many were men and how many were female. So to do that, I'll simply say sns.countplot. I add the hue as sex. So I want to know how many females and how many males survive, then I'll be specifying the data. So I'm using Titanic ship dataset, and let me just run this. So you can see I have survived column on the x-axis and I have the count on the y-axis. Now, so here blue color stands for your male passengers and orange stand for your female passengers. So as you can see here, the passengers who did not survive, that has a value 0. So we can see that the majority of the females did not survive, and if we see the people who survived here, we can see the majority of females survive. So this basically concludes the gender of the survival rate. So it appears on average women were more than the 3 times more likely to survive than men. Next, let us plot another plot where we have the hue as a passenger class. So Over here, we can see which class at the passenger was traveling in. So whether it was traveling in class 1, 2 or 3. So for that, I just arrived at the same command. I will say sns dot count plot. I gave my x-axis as a survived only. I'll change my hue to passenger class. So my variable is named as p class and the data set that I'll be using the Titanic ship data. So this is my result. So now you can see I have blue for first class, orange for second class and green for the third class. So here the passenger who did not survive majorly of the third class, or you can say that the lowest class or the cheapest class to get into the Titanic, and the people who did survive majorly belong to the higher classes. So here first and second has more rise than the passenger who were traveling in the third class. So here we have computed that the passengers who did not survive a majority of the third class, or you can see the lowest class, and the passengers who were traveling in the first and second class would tend to survive more. Next, I just plot a graph for the age distribution over here. I can simply use my data. So we'll be using the pandas library for this. I will declare an array and I'll pass in the column, that is age. So I plot and I want a histogram. So I'll say plot.hist. So you can notice over here that we have more of young passengers, or you can see the children's between the ages 0 to 10, and then we have the average age people, and if you go ahead, less would be the population. So this is the analysis of the age column, and we saw that we have more young passengers and more video courage passengers which are traveling in the Titanic. So next, let me plot a graph of fare as well. So I'll say Titanic data, I say fare, and again I'll plot a histogram. So I'll say hist. So here you can see the fare size is between 0 to 100. Now let me add the bin size. So as to make it clearer, so here I'll say beans is equal to 20 and I'll increase the figure size as well. So I'll say figure size, let's say I'll give the dimensions as 10 by 5. So this is clearer. Now next, it is analyze the other columns as well. So I'll just type in Titanic ship data and I want the information as to what all columns are left. So here we have passenger ID, which I guess it's a no use. Then we have seen how many passengers survived and how many did not. We also do the analysis of the gender basis. We saw with the female tend to survive more or the men tend to survive more. Then we saw the passenger class where the passengers is traveling in the first class, second class or third class. Then we have the name. So in name we cannot do any analysis. We saw the sex, we saw the age as well. Then we have sib sp. So this stands for number of siblings or the spouse in which are aboard the Titanic. So let us do this as well. So I'll say as sns dot count plot. I mentioned x as sib sp and I will be using the Titanic ship data. So you can see the plot over here and you can conclude that it has the maximum value on 0. So we can conclude that neither children nor a spouse was on board the Titanic. Now second higher value is 1 and then we have various values for 2, 3, 4 and so on. Next, if I go above the store, this column as well. Similarly, can you do 4 purge? So next, we have purge. So you can see the number of parents or childrens which are both the Titanic. So similarly, can do this is well, then we have the ticket number. So don't think so. Any analysis is required for ticket. Then we have fares, that is we have already discussed, as in the people who tend to travel in the first class. You will pay the highest fare. Then we have the cable number. And we have embarked. So these are the columns that will be doing data wrangling on. So we have analyzed the data and we have seen quite a few graphs in which we can conclude which variable is better than another, or what is the relationship they hold. In the next session, we'll work on the next step. If you have any doubt, you can ask your doubt in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching.